Welcome to 2024. To start this on a realistic, transparent note, I'm struggling at the moment. And the reason for that is because I have somehow fallen into a place where I seem to have 2 full-time jobs and like a family to look after. And I'm also kind of a little bit homeless at the moment. Not really, but a little bit. So this 2 full-time job situation is basically because I'm a YouTuber and I make videos and I have to keep making videos. And I don't know how many of you watching are YouTubers, but like I don't think that's a very easy job. Depends on what you're doing, I guess, but I would not say being like making YouTube videos full time is an easy job. You know, I think I worked full time at EA and then I left and like to make YouTube videos full time, and I think that was not a transition where I was like, oh, sweet, I've got so much free time now. This is amazing. But then, like, I'm also, building a game engine. That's not easy either. And like, we, the team, we have big plans for Hazel. So it's not something that I can treat lightly. Peter works on Hazel all the way in Sweden. That's his job. Like, that's his only job. That's what he does for a living. There are volunteers also. We have 0x or Jim, we have Emily, we have Jay. We are building this, substantially complex product of which I am the director of. But like, not just from a product direction or vision standpoint, from like a software engineering technical leadership standpoint. And drawing this back to the fact that, game engines are complicated and they're not very easy to build. If we're a small team, then building such a mammoth of a piece of software ain't easy. It ain't easy, bro. So this video is gonna go in one of 2 directions. Either I just resign right now and say, that's it. It's finished, it's done. There is no more Cherno on the internet. Or you and I figure out a way to try and combine these 2 jobs of mine. Now, the thing is, like I've tried this before. Like, if you think that this is my first time being like, or why didn't I think of making videos about Hazel? It's so easy. I see so many YouTubers making devlogs about games, and that's all their channel is. And I think to myself, like, yeah, those devlogs are definitely taking up a decent amount of time to produce, but at least all of their videos are basically centered around their major project that they're working on. Now, my videos are a little bit different. My channel there's a diverse amount of content. There's variety. It's not just Hazel 24/7. It's code reviews, it's like C++ videos, which I haven't done in a while. It's tutorial style content, like how do we use IMGUI to do this or that, or like what's the best way to like read C++ code. I definitely don't want to stop making helpful videos because people seem to benefit from that and people seem to enjoy that. And also they usually do well, like views wise. And that's important because that's how I support my existence, and not even just my existence. But I think that everyone can probably agree, looking at my channel, if you really critically analyze my channel, I don't know if anyone thinks about this, but I feel like I'm just not very good at making devlogs. I feel like I just, for whatever reason, I can't keep doing it. I don't like the way they turn out. I think that they're boring. It's really weird because, I like telling stories. I like showing things. I wanted to be a filmmaker before I actually got into programming in the first place. And yet making the development of a 3D game engine with a team of talented people just seems to be impossible. I don't know why. So as we sit here in this new office that still needs a lot of work done to it, which I'm going to do, I'm gonna try again. It's 2024, you knew where this was going. As I said, it's either I resign or I try again. I'm gonna try and make interesting videos showing my life and the development of Hazel. This is the devlog, like, version 20. The truth is that, like, because I've been so busy making other videos and because of lots of other stuff going on in my life, which I may share in later videos, I've been almost solely focused on making YouTube videos that are not related to Hazel. And my only real involvement with Hazel has been directing the team, having meetings with the team, seeing what people are working on, seeing what they need help with, giving technical advice and guidance, fixing maybe the occasional bug if I'm lucky, and that's not enough. Like, I need to work on Hazel. It started off as my engine. I was the only one who did anything on it, and now it's grown and there's a team doing it, and because of that, it keeps moving forward, but it's like it's moving forward without me because I don't have time to do it anymore because I'm so busy making other videos, whereas I really feel like I'm tipping too much into that kind of place, because there needs to be a balance. There's a scale of Cherno the software engineer and Cherno the YouTuber. And if I'm doing too much programming and not enough videos, like I feel like, you know, financial incentives aside, like I feel like I want to make more videos. If I'm making too many videos, I feel like I want to be programming, I want to be working on Hazel, I want to be actually building something, not just talking about building something like I am right now. It's kind of therapeutic, this video recording experience for me. Anyway, I actually had a pretty decent week. I had a bad week, spent the evening pretending it wasn't that deep. Maybe later. You know, let's go over my week. What day? It's Thursday, the 18th of January today. I did 3 live streams this week. Can I just talk about how, like, happy I am with myself for doing that? So, the first live stream on Monday night was kind of like a bit of a test live stream because that was my first live stream in the office and it was my return to Twitch as well. So for those of you who don't know, I left Twitch and moved to YouTube live streaming full-time, I guess, on the Cherno Unplugged channel, which I'll have linked below. That's like my long-form content / live stream channel. I did that because I was really mostly live streaming the Game Engine series and I had to like edit that, put that up on YouTube anyway, and I was like, why don't I just stream it directly to YouTube? The quality will be better as well because Twitch limits you to 6 megabits a second. People joining late can rewind the live stream. The VOD, like the video, stays up on YouTube after the stream is done automatically. It just made a lot of sense. But then I was kind of missing the spontaneous live streaming aspect. If I have an hour and I need to do some programming, why not just chuck a stream up? That kind of behavior I was missing a little bit because I was like, well, it's on YouTube, like, you know, do I save the VOD? Do I not save the VOD? It felt a little bit more official. It almost felt like it had to be higher quality because, like, I don't know, I don't have a good reason why it did, but I really felt like since Twitch and YouTube both allow this in their live streaming agreements, like why don't I just treat Twitch as like the live streaming platform and YouTube as the video platform? But then the Game Engine series, which remember is at the end of the day just video content, it's episodic video content, but it's recorded live, it's streamed live. So that makes sense for that to be on YouTube because the whole purpose of that stream is to produce a video. And then that way for content that was purely supposed to be a live stream, first and foremost, like that would be on Twitch. And I missed all the other Twitch features, that were missing from YouTube live streaming. So it was kind of nice to be back. So I did that on Monday, then Tuesday Game Engine series, then Wednesday, in the morning, I was just like, this stuff that I've been working on in Hazel is bugging me a little bit. Let me share it with you. And so I did a live stream. In fact, why don't I just show you what it was that was bugging me? I'm just gonna show you like on the computer. I was going to edit the live stream that I recorded and just show you bits and pieces of what the process was like, what was bugging me. Those live streams were like a collective 4 hours. I'm gonna be real here. I just don't have time to go through that much footage and edit it. If I had an editor, maybe that would be better. Instead, what I wanna do is like provide you with like a dramatic reenactment of what was going on, what I'm working on, and like how I fixed some of the things that were bugging me. So what you're seeing here is Hazel, a very bright Hazel, and that's actually part of the problem. We'll get to that in a minute. And what I was working on was I was finally getting around to finishing thumbnails because one of the big things for this year, one of the things is we're kind of making the editor a little bit better. And so part of that is thumbnails. So you can see that like before we just had icons like this for everything. What I have been working on, what I started working on about a year ago for a week, then I abandoned it. Now I'm coming back to it is thumbnails. So you can see this is a texture, for example, this is a mesh source. We're able to actually see these things, in the form of like a preview thumbnail that shows what they are. And this works not just for things like textures, but also for meshes. And it also works for materials. And so what I was seeing was this. Like check out this weird like spotty. I don't even know what's going on. It's just, it looks really, really weird. And, you know, if you look at the actual material over here, there's no albedo map. I think there is in this one, right? But there's no albedo map in here, so it's not like it's part of the texture of that material. No, for some reason, it's just weird. There's like these artifacts. But furthermore, you can see that these materials don't have that. So there's something very specific going on with this material that's not in this material that's causing this problem. But there's also, as you may have noticed, there's just a lot of brightness going on. Like even if I go to meshes, like look at this. Let me just make this bigger. Look at this cube scene. Why is it glowing? There's a lot of light. There's a lot of light energy coming from somewhere. Now, how do I debug where this is coming from? Well, these thumbnails, these ones over here, the code that controls how that's working is this material thumbnail generator. And so what it does is it sets up a Hazel scene, you know, assigns the material to a sphere, renders it, and the lighting associated with this is a directional light as well as the standard lighting that we use for every single scene that we render. So like those meshes that were also rendered in a scene, like the mesh thumbnails, I mean. All of that has an environment light called a skylight. So these things are all flowing through Hazel's just standard like physically based rendering shaders. And so the cool thing about that is, check this out, we can just edit those shaders and regenerate the thumbnails. So if I open up the PBR shader, for example, and this is exactly what I did on stream. In fact, I haven't actually reverted it. This is what it used to be. If I go over here into shaders and I reload this shader, this is actually what it's supposed to be like with like a directional light. But anyway, the point is I can edit this shader code that is rendering both the scene and these thumbnails. So if I set it to pink, for example, I reload this shader, we're obviously gonna see it in the scene. But then if I press this little button I made to clear the thumbnail cache and regenerate the thumbnails, you can see that they're pink. So this is fantastic because I've now got obviously a very easy way to sort of debug the rendering that's going into all of these thumbnails. And so you can see that it's very easy to first of all discern whether or not the problem is coming from direct lighting, such as this directional light that we see here. There's like, you know, point lights and stuff and spotlights in the scene, but in the scene for these thumbnails, there's just a directional light. So we have that directional light, clearly looks pretty good, like no spots, nothing like that. So it's definitely going to be with the image-based lighting, which is kind of our indirect environment light. And you can see that over here. So that's good. So let's kind of scroll up and take a look at the code that's calculating that lighting. And we see it over here. So image-based lighting is made up of two components, really. There's the diffuse and there's the specular. If you're a graphics person, this is probably already clicking because you may have noticed from earlier that these don't have the spots, right? So what's the difference between this and this? Well, these clearly look like metals. So the way that metals are rendered is they actually don't have this diffuse component. There's this term called KD over here. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but the point is this. You can see that there's a parameter for the metalness, for whether or not this material is a metal or a dielectric. So dielectric like a plastic or wood, something like that. So if it is a metal, then this would be 1, and 1 minus 1 is 0, and anything times 0 is 0. So this KD is 0, and 0 times diffuse IBL means that that term obviously gets cancelled out entirely. So just the specular IBL is being used for these metals. And if I reload the shader and then regenerate these thumbnails, you can see they have no effect. And obviously all of these now look like metals. So we know that the problem has to be inside this diffuse IBL. And if we do look at that specifically, then you can see now everything is basically using that. The metals are all black because this is 0. But if we narrow this down more, diffuse IBL really, I mean, the albedo gets multiplied with the irradiance, but the irradiance is just this irradiance texture, which is like a 32 by 32 cube map that contains an extremely blurry representation of our environment map. So if I quickly show you roughly what that would look like, if I go into this skylight that we have for this, which is actually what's creating this backdrop, and I just change this LOD to like, I don't know, this or something. It's very bright. But this is what you're looking at now is basically what the irradiance map would look like. So it's a very, very low resolution, 32 by 32, very blurry representation of the environment light. It's so blurry that it can act as like the diffuse component, meaning it's just like the pure, very simplified light colors and energy, amount of energy as well that's hitting your object. If we go back over here, this line over here, you can see samples that irradiance texture, that cube map based on the normals of the object you're rendering. That's being used as a texture coordinate. So if I just look at that irradiance and I reload this, then, well, there we go. So this is just the environment map, not multiplied by the albedo. That's why you don't see the colors anymore. And it's obviously got these weird spots. It was at this point that I remembered, I know what this is. I've fixed this problem. And I'm pretty sure I fixed it more than once in Hazel. I don't know why it's present, but it is. And by the way, the other thing that I did was, you can see I verified to make sure that it was in fact happening in this viewport in the scene as well, just to make sure there wasn't something really weird with the scene setup for these thumbnails. So this is like the main scene, and you can see it's still got that. So with that in mind, we know that the irradiance texture is messed up for some reason. So how does the irradiance texture get generated? The issue is probably gonna be there. And if we take a look at the irradiance texture, and how it gets generated. Well, as I mentioned, it's a 32 by 32 like resolution cube map per face. And that's obviously quite a low resolution compared to the original source environment map, which is probably like gonna be a 2048 or like a 4K resolution cube map. Like this is much smaller. So how do we downsample all of that data, like 4096 by 4096, you know, that's a lot of data, that's a lot of pixels. How do we downsample that into something so small whilst still retaining an accurate representation of the general light that's happening in that environment? And the answer is, we sample the hell out of it. So you can see there's a uniform here called samples, and samples is multiplied by 64 to create this variable, and this variable is the for loop iteration count. So 64 times samples. Now samples are defined inside the renderer config, and they are set to irradiance map compute samples 512. So 512 times 64, which is 32,000. This runs 32,000 times, but wait, per pixel. So for each pixel of the irradiance cube map, we basically kind of average-ish 32,000 samples of the original source asset. So what does that mean, and why is it relevant to the spottiness? Well, to cut a long story short, since we are really considering that source asset so heavily, if you have parts of that environment map that just contain too much light energy, then because those values are so wildly high, you kind of begin to see the sampling pattern inside your, what should be a completely diffuse, very cleanly buttery smooth sampled irradiance map. And that's really easy to test. So this is us sampling the original irradiance map, which is that full resolution cube map that we use for the specular component of our image-based lighting. We're sampling that over here. Let's just maybe set this to like, well, let's cap it at a max value. So we're gonna set it to be no higher than, like, let's say 500. That's what I used on the stream. So if I now run this, because remember the other issue that I was seeing, that I was noticing in the back of my mind, was just the excessive brightness of everything. So this is beginning to make sense. But really the reason why I came onto this, I think, so quickly is just because I had done it before. And I think that as you get more experience, you know, working with graphics and rendering, you just develop an eye for these things. You visually begin to see like, oh, I can see like the math being wrong in this part or in that part, because I guess what you're seeing, like final image, like what you are seeing, or every step of the way, what you're seeing is just the result of math, and certain miscalculations, certain common mistakes tend to look a particular way. So now if I look at this is the exact same scene. You can see this is way darker now, but also we don't have that anymore, right? This looks much better. Now, at this point in time, and I guess we should probably look at the actual thumbnails, but you can see that it's also gone from here. Like these look pretty nice now. These look pretty smooth. So at this point, of course, what we would do is we would go back to the shader and we'd be like, all right, well, let's get back our KD times diffuse IBL plus specular IBL. So we're getting back that term. So we're adding in that specular now, which would show up for metallic materials. So if I reload this, oh, this is super bright again. And if I regenerate the thumbnails, they look pretty good, I think. Not too bad, but there's still like this weird section. Like, look at this guy. Doesn't this guy look super weird? He's like dark in the middle, kind of like half a moon, and then is like really like, it almost looks like the Fresnel is just crazy. And then this is just, it just looks really weird. And of course, it probably doesn't take a genius at this point to realize that, well, obviously the way that we did it just then was we only did it affecting the irradiance. So this was sampling the already hugely bright radiance map. So the solution should be, when we initially read that, and we read these from equirectangular 2D images, why don't we just do that capping here? So let's grab the color that we sample from the original equirectangular texture, and let's just make sure that there is some kind of maximum in place. Now, if I was doing this more formally, this might be a definition, this might be like potentially even some uniform variable or something that might be controllable, just because I feel like maybe sometimes you are going for a weird effect, or you want to control this, or 500 might even be too much for your taste. Maybe you want to cap it to 50. So there is probably, you know, future work there to improve it. And of course, if you add it here, you don't need to have it inside the irradiance anymore. Let's also make sure we're making this a vec4, because it's a vec4 here, and setting this to color. And there we go. This is our scene now. So this is the exact same scene that you just saw, but now we're capping both like the radiance and the irradiance map. So if I take a look at our thumbnails, notice how much darker everything is, by the way. Let me just make these guys bigger. So yeah, they look much better now. This still has that sort of behavior, but you can see it looks much better. Like the Fresnel isn't crazy. This is just, I think, way more how it's supposed to be compared to what it was before. Here's that cube scene. Totally not too bright anymore. In fact, you could probably turn up that skylight. By the way, one thing that we're still not doing is direct lighting, because I didn't have that. So if we go back to the PBR shader, let's bring back light contribution plus IBL contribution. Light contribution really is just direct lighting contribution into the final color of that pixel. So if we reload the PBR shader, we should see it. Obviously now all the direct lighting, like the spotlights and everything, is back now. And then if I refresh this, you can see this looks a bit brighter because it's got direct lighting. And if we go into a place with more, you know, we've even got shadows and stuff, which is pretty cool inside these thumbnails. Pretty nice, pretty good quality thumbnails. Yeah, like if we go back to those materials, because I think they may have also had a directional light. Yeah, so you can see that kind of shadow, or the darker spot. Really, it's not really a shadow, but it's almost like a self shadow. That's part of the directional light that's in the scene. And yeah, so that's our nice thumbnails. So that's one of the things that was bugging me that I really wanted to fix. So I just jumped up on the live stream and fixed it. I think the dramatic reenactment way of explaining this, instead of editing together a live stream of it happening in real life, is kind of nice, to be honest, because I think it's a lot quicker. It lets me reflect on it. And also it hopefully encourages you to watch the live stream, because you're not going to get that content anywhere else. So twitch.tv/thecherno. I'm gonna get a coffee and I'm gonna film it for the vlog. How does this look? I've never filmed a video in my car. It's kind of fun being a vlogger. I don't have like a, I don't have a stand, like a, how's this angle? It's probably complete rubbish. Can you see me? Alright. I'm just gonna like order a cappuccino and then collect the cappuccino and then drive back, so I don't know, maybe I don't need to film this. And we're back in the office. Yet another successful coffee run. Tastes like coffee.